What is the biggest betrayal you've ever experienced in your life? New Year's Eve 2016, my girlfriend, brother, and I were hanging out, getting ready to host a party. We went out and got food and drinks. While we were waiting for people to arrive, I decided to lounge for a bit on these hammocks that were in the courtyard of my apartment building. Both of them followed me out. There were two oversized hammocks, so I expected my GF to get in mine with me. Nope, she got into my brother's hammock with him. Obviously, that annoyed me a bit, especially considering that she didn't know him very well. I wasn't cool with that. Anyway, I brushed it off and decided that I'd talk to her about it later after the party. Our friends showed up, we drank and hang out. Fast forward to the end of the party, and it was getting late, so our friends started going home. It was just me, my brother, and my GF still in my apartment. All of a sudden, I started to feel really tired and loopy, which was weird because I only had a couple of drinks. I told my girlfriend that I'm going to lay down because I didn't feel too good. I remember my GF telling me that she was going to have another drink and then come to bed. I stumbled to my room and fell asleep for a while, not too certain for how long, but definitely under an hour. I woke up extremely groggy, room spinning. I was curious where my GF was, so I went out into the living room and she's on my brother's lap making out with him. I told them both to get out of my apartment, and I passed out in my bedroom. It wasn't until later that I connected the dots. The first time I brought my GF home to my place, I passed out in a similar way, only after a couple of drinks. I used to joke around with her about how she me on our first date. She, of course, didn't find it funny. After that incident, I'm fairly certain that she spiked me and tried to sleep with my brother. Anyway, I broke up with her when I woke up the next morning, and I haven't talked to my brother in years. My brother and I grew up together. We were only 1 year apart, completely inseparable up until that point. Still haunts me a little to this day. Being annoyed about her getting into a hammock with her brother seems like a vast underreaction. I would be like that, but, with lots of characters to represent curse words. Anyway, I would be like, hello, hi, Heather, excuse me, but what on earth is this? Story 2. I took in a friend who was into bad habits and was in recovery. I supported her financially. She tried turning me against my husband, stole thousands of dollars from us, and stole my engagement and wedding ring. I was the first woman in my family to have an engagement ring and actually get married because I wanted to instead of because I got pregnant and needed a wedding. My engagement ring had a lot of meaning to me because of that, and losing it was devastating. She was involved in work for stuff, and I actually had a guy show up to my house months later and try to proposition me. Thank God a man who wouldn't take no for an answer didn't show up. Another dude showed up looking for her because he was madly in love with her. We pressed charges. She never actually spent any time in jail despite it being a huge crime. Makes me mad whenever I think about it. Story 3. When I was a young child, my parents were majorly into bad habits in a small backwoods town out of North Carolina. My sister and I grew up in the back of an old white Toyota, red vinyl seats scattered with burn holes, etc. It was less than ideal, but it was my normal, and I didn't know any other life. My parents would often have my baby sister and I lay on the floorboards under a blanket while they did their dealings in shady areas, and find a rest stop to hotbox their stuff, all while we tried to find any semblance of sleep. I vividly remember belt buckles on my side keeping me up at night before being dropped off at school without any food or basic hygiene needs being met. I hated being the smelly kid. It's something you honestly never forget. Well, fast forward to the 3rd grade, we had a single wide trailer to call home. I was so happy to have a room and a place to sleep, even if running water was still rare and electricity was even less available. But I tell you what, I enjoyed my cold showers, making sure to scrub thoroughly. Sadly, though, my parents still had problems and were often not around, leaving me to take care of my sister most of the time. After 5 days of no parents and me not having attended school since no one could watch my sister, we had no food in the house and I had to figure something out. So I went over to my neighbor's trailer as a last resort. I had seen her, a tall, blonde woman in her mid-20s, constantly caring for her garden and waving occasionally when I would play outside. She wore long-sleeve shirts, long skirts, and her hair always in a bun. She gladly fed us what she could, when she could, and taught us about God. She explained how she would frequent the Pentecostal and Apostolic sermons 4 times a week at different churches in the area, explaining God and love and all the awesome and cool things religion had to offer even the most scraggly children in the world. I was sold. After a year or so, my sister and I went with her to nearly every sermon, and I became very invested in the religion. My sister more so in the cookies and refreshments. That was when she started doing shady stuff, and to spare everyone the details that would ensue for yet another year before my sister and I went into foster care, she turned out to be the devil incarnate. She used God to scare me into doing things no child should, and when I finally mustered the courage to break up, she broke down crying, saying that God would punish both of us for what we had done. She told me God would never let me be a singer. She quite literally took my voice. After years of shame, binge drinking, and therapy, I am in a much better place. I have grown past the trauma and can finally tell my own story without guilt or resentment. I'm working towards my degree in psychiatry and want to become a child psychologist one day so no child can ever feel as though they don't have a voice again. I also have a pop album soon to be released. I'm a strong, happy person in a healthy and loving relationship. I no longer wake up from night terrors feeling imprisoned by her blonde hair and yellow teeth. People can heal, and if you need anything, I know therapy is out of a lot of people's reach, but there are programs. You guys got this, and I'm rooting for you. And I'm rooting for you too, but I'm also wondering what happened to the sister. I hope she has just as happy an ending as her brother, at least. Story 4. I made the mistake of letting my best friend talk me into working for him. It went okay for over a year. But one day, he ordered me to unpack, tear down, and completely rebuild a set of prototypes I had spent the last 3 weeks perfecting and were already on the outgoing shipping dock. He just had an idea that there might be something wrong with them. I protested, pointing out to him that we both had agreed that everything had been repeatedly and thoroughly tested and was ready to ship. He reluctantly agreed, and I thought that was that. A while later, I walked into the engineering lab and found the shipping carton open and the prototypes on the test bench completely torn down. He said, "I guess they were okay after all." I was furious. It was a huge personal insult. Showed a real lack of trust in my technical abilities and professional integrity, and how far off the deep end his judgment had gone. I walked to my cube, gathered my things, and left. I never went back. I liked that job, but was too angry to work for him anymore. I've seen him socially a few times since, but things just aren't the same. He apologized, but there's a distance there that I just can't seem to overcome. This whole stupid thing has ruined a 23-year friendship. Yikes, seems like his best friend had some jealousy pent up and was acting like a baby. Story 5. Confided in a good friend / coworker about how much I hated my job and thought our manager was incompetent. She took screenshots and sent them to HR. I didn't get fired, but I lost a promotion opportunity and got thrown in the doghouse. My management team made my life miserable and did everything to get me to quit, but I didn't budge. The girl I told was promoted to a manager role within 2 months and badmouthed me every chance she got. It's been almost 10 years since then, but it ended up working out. I ended up leaving that job and city for a major upgrade in both. I'm thriving now, personally and professionally. The girl who reported me to HR ended up getting fired not long after I left. She tried to do real estate, but she failed at that too. She recently texted me, again, it's been nearly 10 years and she still had my number, to try and sell me insurance. I didn't respond. I'm not a vengeful guy, but man, that felt good. Story 6. A coworker became my BFF and we co-ran a small business together for a toxic but mostly absentee owner for 7 years. Employees admired our friendship and the way we ran the business and often said we should team up and buy the business. We would have wistful what-if convos, but nothing substantive. One day, I came into work and she tells me the owner approached her some months ago wanting to sell her the business. She matter of fact tells me she's doing this and that after looking at the P&Ls, there's no room for a partner. She was so quick and definitive in stating that. I was still reeling from the initial shock, but that statement reverberated in my head for months after. The betrayal and obliteration of what had been the most important friendship in my adult life sent me into a massive depression for 6 to 8 months. Woke up every morning with dread in my chest and went to sleep every night thinking it would be a relief not to wake up. Thankfully, I've crawled my way out of that dark place and I'm grateful for the perspective. I have so much more compassion for people caught in the grips of depression. Story 7. I was heading to see my dad with my grandparents. On the way, we stopped at a hotel near the beach, and before we packed up and left the next day, my grandmother took us to play at the beach. My grandfather was in charge of packing everything and loading everything in the van. It's finally time to go. We get cleaned up, hop in the van, and get back on the road. Before we left, though, I asked my grandfather if he had grabbed my stuff, Theodore, of Alvin and the Chipmunks fame. He said, yes, of course, but it was packed away and we would get it out once we got to my dad's. After driving a few more hours, we arrive, get the car unloaded, and I open up my bags looking for my stuffed best friend, only to find he's gone. I'm mad. My grandpa was like, whatever, sorry. Needless to say, he instantly became my fourth favorite grandparent. As bad as this is, it's not the biggest betrayal. That comes next. My dad comes to the rescue and says, don't worry, we will just get you a new one. 2 weeks go by, no replacement. My sister and I flew home with the parting promise from my dad that he would get one and mail it to me. Guess what never shows up? It was at that point that I realized I could trust no one in this world. I finally broke down and got one last year after giving him 35 plus years to make good on his promise. Story 8. Mine is not romantic. My best friend was more like my brother. Seriously, I had framed pictures of him in the house. Best friend since childhood. He was there at my children's births and was going to be the godfather should something happen to my husband and I. We worked together, all of it. I can't articulate how close we all were. He got a girlfriend and removed us pretty immediately. He just abandoned us and completely bailed on us, completely ceased contact. My children cried and mourned him, asking what they did wrong. He also abandoned literally every other person in his life, including his family members, so was not isolated to just us. We aren't in contact, but last I knew, she had pretty much made his life miserable. He lost his mortgage and has nothing for himself. He's not even allowed to play video games or go to concerts or anything at all. Is it a toxic relationship? Maybe, but at some point, he made a choice. And it was so quick, man. Like, he threw away our relationship over a girl he didn't even know for a month. I would have never seen this coming in a million years. It kind of flipped my view of people permanently. I feel so betrayed. Story 9. When I was in primary school, I won Student of the Month at school. You got a certificate and an assembly, your picture was taken, and the best part, go out to Dairy Queen with your teacher for lunch. It was always made to be a huge deal. I love my second grade teacher, but the month I won, she was out on maternity leave, so another member of staff took me. She was a miserable person, worked in the office, seemed like she hated kids. So we got to Dairy Queen, and being the shy kid I was, I told her my order and she went up to get it. What came wasn't what I ordered. I didn't say anything and ate quietly. I had to go to the bathroom and this lady impatiently said if I wasn't out in 2 minutes, she was leaving. Well, I didn't make it in 2 minutes and came out with her gone. She full on left a kid at Dairy Queen to teach them a lesson. She drove back around to me crying and hiding under a picnic table outside. She got angry, told me to get in and stop being a baby. Back at class, my friends noticed I'd been crying and asked the substitute if I could call my mom. She didn't let me, so the rest of the day I felt hurt and scared. The assembly was in the afternoon, and I actually got excited to get my certificate and shake the principal's hand, then have my picture posted by the office. However, I saw the office lady standing by the gym door, and I started crying again out of embarrassment and asked to go to the bathroom. I hid in the bathroom during the assembly. I felt so ashamed when I heard my dad call my name. He and my mom had come to watch me get the certificate. Crying even harder now, I let him carry me out of school and into my mom's car. To further twist the story, the school didn't do anything about it. It played off like I chose to skip the assembly and that I'd not behave appropriately at Dairy Queen. It took me a long time to even talk to adults who weren't my parents after that. I never felt so betrayed by someone who was not only supposed to be looking after me, but facilitating a special treat for an achievement I'd made. Later in life, I found the certificate. My mom had collected it and put it in a scrapbook of things I've done. She'd written a little note saying, Student of the month of March, student of our hearts every month. I was in my 20s then, but it hurt a lot knowing that this woman robbed what should have been a very happy memory for my family. I've been cheated on, but in my nearly 40 years on Earth, the level of trust and excitement this woman took from me is my biggest betrayal. Story 10. Husband received a text from his mistress as he was handing me a card for our 32nd wedding anniversary. Absolutely knocked me to the ground. Developed PTSD, crippling anxiety and depression. It's been almost 2 years now and I'm finally able to breathe, but still deal with mental health issues. We are still together, but it destroyed me, laying in bed now at 3:30 a.m. because nights can be hard. Been through a lot of counseling, found out that he had about a dozen emotional affairs over the last 10 years. Was basically dating college girls nonstop. When he finally had an affair, it was with a girl 35 years younger. He was my safety net after a traumatic childhood, the only person I ever trusted completely. I knew we would be together forever because we were us and it was different for us. It still hurts so bad. I can hardly type this. He's gently snoring next to me. How do you hate someone that you love so much? My whole life has been him and our kids. Story 11. A longtime friend of mine made a Facebook post about how she desperately needed a new start far away from upstate New York, asking if anyone at all would be willing to drive her as far as possible to make it to her grandma in Florida. I immediately offered but didn't care that she didn't compensate me and drove us 7 or 8 hours into the small hours of the morning. I got us a hotel room to stay in to get some sleep before leaving again, only to be woken up to her excitedly telling me that her grandma had paid for a flight for her to make it the rest of the way. Did the whole teary-eyed goodbye but promised that it wouldn't be the last time we saw each other. It was a few hours later when I made the discovery. She had taken my credit card out of my wallet while I was asleep, purchased herself a plane ticket, and fabricated the whole story. Fabricated everything, really. She responded to my messages telling her just how disappointed I was, simply saying sorry and nothing more. I found out not too long after that she was and had been in bad habits, something I know she apologized for to a number of people she took advantage of. After 8 years later, she's a born-again Christian, and I still haven't gotten as much of a sorry from her, not quite holding my breath on that one. Story 12. I met my best friend in preschool. We were always together, just brothers, fishing in Alaska, riding dirt bikes, getting pestered for our height, together every weekend, gaming or playing with airsoft guns. Then my mental health declined, but I fell in love with a girl also. Our relationship started amazing, but I will say by the time when that happened, we had some rough patches. But when I was a teenager, I attempted to end it all. I was in the hospital for a week as they slowly saved my life. Then in the psych ward for 10 days and then rehab. When I got out, I hadn't heard from my GF the last few weeks in rehab. When I got to school, she was holding hands with my best friend and they were together. Did I mention while I was in the hospital, she was texting me nonstop, but he had sent me a "Are you okay?" and then done. So that was the end of our friendship of over a decade of BFF, and that best friend pulled that after I tried to end it all. If you're getting affected by any one of these stories and you're enjoying the video so far, please don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 13. My husband pleaded with me for 5 years to give him a child, and I finally did. The pregnancy almost took me, but I made it. When our son was still a child, we separated due to by his own admission, severe neglect in our marriage. He immediately met a young Czech Republic girl and they formed a conspiracy plot and took my son. That was 7 years ago. She has replaced me as his mom and he doesn't remember me. Since the day he was taken, I have spent every moment and every penny I can get my hands on trying to get my son back. But we live in a country famous for corruption and my husband has been paying judges, government officials, and even my own lawyers to delay the case. Same story with the divorce because he locked me out of our shared accounts the day he took my baby, and so if the divorce were to go through, he would, in theory, have to pay me money and he wants 100% of our assets and our child. I do not know what my son looks like, what he likes to eat or watch, what kind of education he's getting, or even what his speaking voice sounds like. My son believes I abandoned him because that's what they told him. Story 14. Had a mistreating first husband who left me with a lot of trauma. I worked on it for years, and when I was in a good enough place, I started dating again. I met my second husband, and he convinced me to get married, even though I was really not keen on the idea of marriage again, but I loved him, so I did. We were married for 9 years, and for 9 years, he was stepdad to my 2 kids. We had a small issue, and we decided to go to couples therapy before it became a big one. Prior to this, I had never talked about my ex, other than stating he was mistreating, never really got into the how. Over the course of a few months of therapy, many things came out between us, including details of my previous marriage. I thought the whole thing had made us a stronger couple. 2 years later, he walks into our bedroom one day, completely out of the blue, and says he's moving out. He left that night and never even said goodbye to the kids, not a thing. Moved back to his hometown 2 weeks later, leaving me with way more bills than I could pay on my own. Basically messing with me so bad financially that I'm still digging myself out a year later. That's not the worst part though. His reason for leaving? My traumas with my ex made him decide I was completely untrustworthy and must have been gaslighting and manipulating him, not because I didn't tell him, because that's what it does to a person. I never ever did anything to cause him to distrust me at all. This was completely based on his assumptions. He decided he was going to leave me before we were done with therapy, but had to make sure he could save up some money first, so he was also secretly funneling part of his paycheck into a bank account I knew nothing about. I realized several months later that he had been trying to get me to leave him for several months by saying some rather cruel things to me and treating me badly, but I had just gone through a layoff at work and was under a lot of stress with my oldest kid having been diagnosed with a rather serious mental illness. So I brushed a lot of it off as me being too sensitive. Mostly because he was too much of a coward to just end it, he wanted me to be the bad guy. To add insult to injury, all of my friends were related to him or spouses/girlfriends of his friends, so I was essentially left completely on my own with no support system. I've never felt so alone in my entire life as when I had to tell my therapist that I had no one to be my emergency contact when we had to do the yearly update to my information. So, because of his assumptions about something he knew nothing about and this imaginary manipulation he cooked up in his mind, he manipulated and gaslit me for 2 years and blew up my entire life and everything I had worked so hard for. I'm still in therapy and will be for the foreseeable future because it wrecked my mental health so badly. I'm honestly not sure if I'll ever be able to trust another person ever again. And outside my therapist, I will never ever again share anything about my past with anyone. Story 15. Person whom I'll call Rumi, who I thought was one of my best friends ever in college, whom I got an apartment with 3 years in a row once we were out of freshman dorms, was actually talking behind my back on Tumblr, using my real name, or some of our real life friends follow them. I was called names because I watched Gabriel Iglesias, yes, you read that right, the comedian, and they sent me truly heinous anonymous backlash on Tumblr that repeatedly had me mentally spiral. They were stalking my blog through various proxies and side blogs so I couldn't get tracked back to them. Except they accidentally followed me on their main blog. The username was one of their favorite memes from a TV we both watched. I saw our third roomie had a tag, so I searched for my name. And all that horrific stuff popped up with my real name and then admitting the stalking and proxy blogs and sending anonymous hate. If you'd Googled my name, the blog popped up a couple of links down. I took screenshots. I panicked, confronted Rumi. Rumi had their mom drive up 4 hours to come yell at me about how I never helped her child. I drove Rumi to college twice a week and back home and to groceries, 2 a.m. donut runs, etc. I couldn't get a word in. It was all my fault her child didn't feel comfortable in the apartment despite Rumi keeping it a secret from me. Landlord wouldn't let us break the lease. I slept with my door locked and a hammer next to my bed until Rumi moved out. They were going to college to be an elementary school teacher. Story 16. I lost my 9-year best friend, 5-year relationship, 2-year marriage after my wife sent me a text to end things on July 9th. July turned to August when she was caught kissing another man from her work. She was 11 days pregnant and neither of us knew, but I'm certain she was hoping for. September, when she couldn't hide the facts of her body and cycle all messed up, she left and moved straight into his apartment. Well, on Friday, the 17th of May, she gave birth to a baby of his. She came back in October and we agreed to try and to go straight to marriage counseling. She was unhappy I wasn't healing fast enough and had opinions on it. In December, she left me the second and I said final time in a 3-hour window when I was out of town for work. I lost her, the baby I was preparing to raise, knowing it wasn't mine, my puppy, and my 2 cats. I lost my entire family that night. I'd taken her on a 550-mile trip to her grandparents 2 days prior for a gender reveal for a baby that wasn't mine. I was on my knees kissing a baby bump for a baby that was not mine. Somehow, it's my fault. I'm a narcissist. I only know that because she told me, otherwise I wouldn't ever know, and have been suffering in anxiety trying to find reasons ever since. After she slept with him without protection, because, she has a latex allergy and all, she had taken dollar store Plan B, which causes a super dose of hormones, and she started going out of cycle. She blamed it on me for the stress of living with me for those months until she finally left. It has been a whirlwind, including me losing my job indirectly. I take responsibility for what I did over it. Story 17. So, I'm a bi woman who has never dated men. After a pretty rough breakup a few years ago, my best friend told me he was in love with me. When I say best friend, I mean we met in daycare at an early age and have gone through life together, stuck like glue. I had feelings for him, not big ones, but I told him I didn't want to ruin our friendship. He spent the next year essentially courting me. So we started dating. 6 months later, we finally had been intimate. The next morning, he immediately told everyone in our friend group that he bedded the bi woman and apparently went into detail about the encounter. I am obviously heartbroken and go to his house to see what was going on. He's got another woman sitting on his couch. Tells me he's on a date and it's not a good time. 27 years of friendship was just absolutely gone. I was devastated. Our friend group rallied around me and gave him the boot. I haven't talked to him since, but sometimes I wonder if it was worth it for him in the end. Lost his best friend and all the friends he'd had since middle school. For what? I see him out sometimes and he just looks alone. We live in a fairly small rural area and word traveled fast about what he did to me, so he hasn't been really able to make friends since either. Story 18. My first job, fresh out of college, it was an entry level position, and I always made it clear that my dream job was another position in the company. Boss says they like my stuff and that I'm guaranteed to get promoted into my dream job when the guy in my dream job moves on. A few months later, I'm leaving the office, and the guy who works in the office down the hall comes up to me. So when does the new guy start? What new guy? Oh, that's right, you're not supposed to know yet. And he runs off. A few days later, the guy in my dream job comes up to me. So, hypothetically speaking, if I were to move, would you be interested in buying some of my furniture? My spidey sense is starting to tingle. I ask him, you're hypothetically talking about moving? And the folks in the office next door are asking when the new guy starts. What's going on? He looks defeated and says, the boss better tell you. So we go into the boss's office and he just says, you figured it out. The boss lays it out. Yes, the guy in my dream job is moving on, but I am not being promoted into it as promised. The new guy is her best friend, who was a pretty popular guy in that position some years ago. An opportunity arose to get him back. I'm furious. I stormed out of the meeting and we picked it up again the next day. I asked the boss why she promised me the job if she wasn't going to give it. And then she tells me, with this little gem, I'm not your boss. I am just your supervisor. I do not have the authority to give you that job. I know you want that job and you've started looking for similar positions at other companies, but I like you in your current job and want to keep you, so I lied to you. You know I'm a liar. Your fault for believing me. I filed every complaint I could with every level of management, derailed the plan to get her best friend back. We hired a kid fresh out of school that I had to train. It was the beginning of the end for my boss/supervisor/whatever, who was fired 6 months later. Story 19. I had a best friend in college. We were joined at the hip. We went through a lot of stuff together and stuck with each other. He was a brother to me, and without getting into the details, I sacrificed a lot for him. He started dating a real snake of a woman, and while I voiced my concerns, I remained supportive and even helped him out when she dumped him and he worked to win her back. They treated each other badly, and I even advocated for her when he treated her badly, as well for him when she manipulated him. Despite all my efforts, he continued to grow distant, which was fine, even though it wasn't good for me and he never really showed much gratitude for the ways I supported him, especially when he didn't deserve it. Then through his girlfriend, now wife, he started hanging out with this guy that hated my guts. We were all in the theater department at the university, and the guy hated me because I always got the roles he wanted. Again, all this is fine because he was making his own choices and I continued to support him and always had my arms open if he ever needed anything or just wanted to hang out. Then one day, out of nowhere, he pulled aside a girl I had just started to go on a few dates with and told her that if she continued dating me, I was going to mistreat her. He has no ulterior motives aside from sabotaging my relationship with this girl. A few weeks later, I was hosting a Super Bowl party. I'm a huge football fan, and my favorite team, the Chiefs, was playing in the Super Bowl for the first time in my life. I know it's just a game, but it was a really big deal to me, and I was so excited for this game. Our college was a private Christian university, and it was a dry campus, so even though I was 21, I wasn't supposed to have a drink. No one really cared or checked though unless someone filed a report, so I did have some drinks in my dorm, although I was not sharing it for my Super Bowl party. Well, what do you know? My former best friend decided to call campus safety and report me for throwing a rager, and that there were a bunch of drinks and people drinking in my dorm. Even though they knocked on my door, they immediately realized that's not what was happening. They were required to search the dorm and they found one empty can, which was enough to get everyone in trouble, primarily me. And since my quote unquote friend strategically waited until the second half to make the call, while my team was winning the Super Bowl, I was in the campus safety office filling out an incident report. I also had to pay a large fine for breaking the rules. Obviously, these things aren't life shattering, but it absolutely wrecked me that someone could be hateful and spiteful to me when I hadn't done anything to him except be his friend. He wanted to hurt me so badly that he was willing to get a bunch of other people in trouble too, even people he considered to be his friends. I tried to talk to him after just to understand why he hated me so much, but he refused to talk to me. Now, the few times I've bumped into him out and about in the years since, he's acted like we're old friends and nothing ever happened. Story 20. My best friend lied to me about being in danger. When I was just a young girl, I moved to a different state and was devastated to part with my best friend. We were both outcasts at school. We talked all the time. My wonderful parents must have paid so many long-distance fees after we moved now that I think about it. About a month after I moved away, she told me about how she had been talking to someone in an online chat room, new and spicy back then. That it was a high school guy and he liked her, that she was going to meet up with him. That they had met and he was older than he said, but he was so hot. That he had done prison time, that he had his own car and would pick her up from the mall next time. They were planning to go to his house, that he had talked about doing things with her. I was horrified. I talked to her all the time about how concerned I was, about how she shouldn't do it. Their date kept getting delayed for one reason or another, and it was this whole drawn-out thing. I finally broke down one day and told my parents that they needed to call the police for my friend and that I was worried she was in danger. My parents called her parents, and I don't know if they called the authorities or not. I just know it was a fiasco and not great for my friend or her family. It turned out that it was all a lie. My friend didn't even have access to the family computer. So why did she lie? Apparently my friend was worried she wasn't interesting enough and that I would stop talking to her, so she made up this crazy story so that I would keep talking to her. I was heartbroken that she would intentionally lie and make me worry so much. I had spent hours sobbing on the phone with her, begging her not to do these things. I never spoke to her again. Out of all the betrayals in my life, this was the worst because it was just the saddest that her actions resulted in the thing she was desperately, crazily trying to prevent. We were just kids, and I think the ability to look back on this as an adult just makes it even sadder to me. Her friend's actions, while deceptive and hurtful, might have stemmed from insecurity and a fear of losing their friendship. Story 21. In 1972, I was in a traffic accident. There was a lawsuit and a large sum was put into a trust fund. I attempted to get the money and my mom kept spitting all these lies trying to prevent me from accessing the account. An example, she claimed that to get the account, I needed a document, but that document was in the safety deposit box, free at the bank because the account had a lot of money. And unfortunately, the key was lost. So I go to the bank and they explain that I need to pay to have a locksmith open the safety deposit box, which I did. It wasn't cheap, and the box turns out to be empty. I asked the bank, how do I get the account? They explained all it would take is to go to the courthouse and petition to gain control over the account. So I let my mom know about that, and she basically loses her mind trying to stop me no matter what it would take with drama. This leads up to the day that I go to the courthouse, and in the hallway, she was there waiting for me, has a hysterical crying tantrum, and finally the truth spills out. Obviously, all these lies was because she'd managed to drain the account down from the initial $30,000, and now there was about $1,000 remaining. Savings account interest was significantly more than today, and the money would have increased greatly had she just left it alone. The reason why she was so hysterical about all this turned out not to only be because the money was more or less gone. The reason was that each time she made a withdrawal, she also had to go to the courthouse and petition. A clerk in one department would create the document, and then my mom would have to go to a judge and get their agreement and signature on that document. After a number of these visits to the courts, the judges realized she was lying and refused to go along and wouldn't sign the thing. So then my mother got the brilliant idea that she herself could just forge the judge's signature, which she did on numerous occasions. Eventually, she got caught and the whole file was somehow made restricted. And all that drama because my mom's attempt to keep me from finding out about all that. Story 22. Toward the end of my marriage, my ex-husband had a midlife crisis and went off the rails. He honestly went crazy. I found out about a whole lot of betrayals after the fact, but probably the worst was finding out that while he was staying at the house during the divorce, while I was securing the financing and paperwork to finish putting the house and the mortgage in my name, he had rented an apartment of his own. He had it for months behind my back and was continuing to live in the house, making my life miserable, and hadn't told me that he had his own place. He may have had it for years for all I know, since one time when we were at a furniture store, the employee had made a strange comment to my ex about some furniture that my ex had wanted being in, and when I questioned him about it, he convinced me that the guy had been joking. He made it seem like he just found this place right before the scheduled closing date, but when he moved out, he revealed to me that he'd had the place for a while and could have been staying there the whole time during our divorce. He had just wanted to live in the house to stay because I dared to leave him. He put me through absolute misery during the divorce, and it made me sick to find out that he could have been staying at his apartment the whole time. He was almost certainly going there during the day while he was claiming to be at work. That was how he had gotten away with cheating for as long as he did. He had a job that allowed him to drive around and see clients, and while he was out, he would duck out and see the women he had been messaging on dating apps, which is what eventually led to the divorce. This was a long time ago, and it took me a while to get past what happened, but I'm in a better place now and have been in a long-term relationship for many years with a good person. My ex remarried almost immediately after our divorce, and I hope for his second wife's sake that he treats her better than he did to me. And if any of these stories got to you, here's more YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video.